Billionaire boss and the single dad. My new boss was the kind of executive people whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear them. She had a reputation for cutting employees loose without hesitation. Someone could call in sick, ask for personal time, or simply fail to meet one of her impossible standards, and they could find themselves unemployed before lunch. From the moment she took control of the company, she made one thing very clear. She wanted commitment. No excuses. No distractions. And absolutely no personal problems brought through the doors. For someone like me, that was terrifying. I was a single father, barely keeping my finances together, and every dollar I earned already had somewhere to go. For nearly 3 months, I kept my daughter's existence hidden from the woman who controlled my paycheck. I thought I was protecting my family. I had no idea that everything was about to collapse the day I walked into a school principal's office and discovered my billionaire boss sitting across from my 7-year-old daughter. My alarm didn't ring that morning. It practically attacked me. The cheap plastic clock on my nightstand rattled against the wood at 4:45 in the morning. I had bought it from a discount store years earlier, and its shrill buzzing had become the soundtrack of my life. I reached out and slapped the button. My hand hurt. My back hurt. Pretty much everything hurt. For several seconds, I simply stared at the water stain on the ceiling of my tiny apartment. I knew every crooked edge of it. I was 32 years old, surviving on barely 4 hours of sleep a night, and completely responsible for another human being. Her name was Mia. She was 7 years old, missing 2 front teeth, and sleeping peacefully in the bedroom across the hall. She had no idea that her father was one missed paycheck away from disaster. I dragged myself out of bed. The hardwood floor was freezing beneath my feet. Then the routine began. Coffee. The cheapest kind I could find. Burnt. Bitter. Necessary. Then came breakfast and lunch. I spread generic peanut butter across 2 slices of whole grain bread and carefully removed the crusts. Mia could eat the crusts. She simply preferred not to. And if I left them on, she would stare at the sandwich like I'd personally betrayed her. That morning, I managed a small smile as I packed her lunch. By the time I kissed her forehead and dropped her at the school's morning care program, the first week light of day was beginning to appear through the clouds over Portland. I climbed back into my old sedan and drove toward the office. For almost 5 years, I'd worked as a senior project manager at a regional logistics company. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exciting. But it was steady. And steady was exactly what I needed. Then Victoria Vale bought the company. Victoria wasn't the kind of billionaire who simply purchased businesses and left them alone. She dismantled them. She rebuilt them. She stripped away anything she considered unnecessary. She was 41, completely self-made, and notorious throughout the industry. Financial magazines called her brilliant. Employees called her ruthless. People who had actually worked for her used another word. Machine. The acquisition happened frighteningly fast. On Monday, our former CEO was packing his office. By Wednesday, Victoria was standing in front of hundreds of employees. She wasn't wearing anything flashy. No giant designer logos. No extravagant jewelry. Just a perfectly tailored dark gray suit. It looked more like armor than clothing. Her hair was pulled tightly back, and her expression was impossible to read. "I don't care how things were done before I arrived," she said. Her voice was calm. That somehow made it worse. This company is losing money because of inefficiency. Too many people have become comfortable. Nobody moved. Comfort creates mediocrity. From today forward, Meridian Logistics gets your full attention. She paused. If you have outside distractions, remove them. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. If your lifestyle doesn't allow you to meet the demands of this company, there is the exit. She wasn't bluffing. Within 2 weeks, 6 employees were gone. One of them was Marcus from accounting. I actually liked Marcus. We used to complain about the terrible coffee together. His mistake was asking for 2 days off because his wife had just had their first baby. Victoria fired him. She didn't scream. She didn't insult him. She simply explained that his priorities no longer matched the company's direction. Then security escorted him outside. The message was obvious. Personal lives were liabilities. Families were distractions. Children were inconvenient. If you wanted to survive under Victoria Vale, you needed to become invisible once you walked through the office doors. That afternoon, I returned to my desk and quietly removed the drawings Mia had made for me. I had taped several of them beside my monitor. I folded them carefully and placed them inside my bottom drawer. Then I took down the photograph of Mia and me at the waterfront. I put it inside my briefcase. I removed every tiny reminder that I was a father. It felt horrible. Like I was hiding the most important part of my life because I was ashamed of it. But I wasn't ashamed of Mia. I was afraid of losing the job that kept her safe. I had rent to pay. Bills to cover. School expenses. And I couldn't afford to make a principled stand if the consequence was leaving my daughter without a home. Then the workload became brutal. Victoria introduced mandatory evening reviews. 5 o'clock became 6:30. Then 7:30. Eventually, leaving before 8 became unusual. I had no choice but to depend on our teenage neighbor, Jenna, to collect Mia from school and stay with her until I came home. Every evening, the guilt followed me. It sat beside me during the drive home. It waited for me outside the apartment. Sometimes I would unlock the door and find Mia asleep on the couch with the television glowing against her face. I would carry her to bed. I'd kiss her forehead. And I'd whisper an apology she couldn't hear. Then I'd set the alarm for 4:45. At work, I became exactly what Victoria wanted. Efficient. Quiet. Reliable. I spoke in numbers. I met deadlines. I never complained. I never mentioned Mia. Then Victoria called me into her office. Her corner suite overlooked the city through enormous glass windows. She was studying a report on her tablet when I entered. Daniel. Yes, Ms. Vale? She finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp enough to make me feel as if she could see every lie I'd ever told. Your third quarter projections are excellent. Thank you. I'm assigning you to the Orion integration. My stomach tightened. The Orion deal was the biggest project in the company. A $60 million merger. And it was scheduled to go live in less than a month. That project requires total commitment, she said. I already knew where this was going. Weekends included. Late nights. No interruptions. She watched me carefully. I don't want to hear about your commute. I don't want to hear about fatigue. And I certainly don't want personal obligations interfering. Then she leaned back. Can you handle that? I thought about Mia's worn-out sneakers. I thought about our rent. I thought about the grocery bill sitting on my kitchen counter. I swallowed. I can handle it. Good. She returned to her tablet. Don't disappoint me. I walked out feeling as though I'd just traded away something I couldn't afford to lose. And I knew exactly who would pay the price. The first week of the Orion integration nearly destroyed me. The second week began destroying Mia. She was intelligent. Bright. Resilient. But she was 7. She didn't understand mergers. She didn't understand corporate deadlines. She only understood that her father had disappeared. The man who used to make ridiculous faces while cooking pancakes on Saturday mornings was suddenly gone before she woke up and returning after she was asleep. Jenna was doing more parenting than I was. One Thursday evening, she stood near the apartment door while I loosened my tie. Mia was really quiet today, she said. I looked toward the living room. She didn't want to play. My chest tightened. She just drew in her notebook and went to bed. I handed Jenna some cash. Thanks. She looked at me. You know you don't have to pay me every time. I know. But I did anyway. I'll try to get home earlier tomorrow. The lie hung between us. We both knew it was a lie. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was presentation week. The entire office was under pressure. The Orion presentation was supposed to determine whether the merger succeeded. Victoria walked around the floor like a predator. Every typo was noticed. Every delay was questioned. Every employee looked terrified. At 12:40, I was buried in spreadsheets when my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Maplewood Elementary. My stomach dropped. The school never called unless something was wrong. I hesitated. Victoria walked past my desk. "Don't answer that," she said. The phone kept vibrating. I picked it up and moved away from the desks. "Hello? Mr. Reed?" It was Principal Grant. His voice sounded strained. "I need you to come to the school." "I can't right now." I looked toward the conference room. "I'm minutes away from the most important presentation of my career." "Your daughter isn't physically injured." My heart stopped. "Then what happened?" "She's locked herself inside a supply room." I blinked. "What?" "She refused to participate in an art activity. She threw a box of markers, ran out of the classroom, and locked herself inside." I could hear crying in the background. "She keeps asking for you." My chest tightened. "I need you to come immediately." Mia wasn't aggressive. She loved drawing. She loved school. She loved her friends. Something had finally pushed her past the point where she could pretend everything was fine. "I'll be there." I ended the call. Around me, employees were gathering their laptops. The Orion review was about to begin. I stood there frozen. If I stayed, I was abandoning my daughter. If I left, I could lose everything. My job. My income. Our home. Her future. Fear told me to stay. Being her father told me to go. I grabbed my coat. I had barely reached the elevators when a voice stopped me. "Reed." I turned. Victoria stood outside the conference room. Everyone else was already seated behind the glass. She held a folder in one hand. "Where are you going?" "I have a family emergency." My voice shook. "I need to leave." Victoria glanced at the clock. "The Orion review begins in 7 minutes." "I'm sorry. You're the lead analyst." "I know. If you aren't in that room, this presentation falls apart." I left everything on the shared drive. "I don't pay you to upload files." Her voice hardened. "I pay you to present them." I said nothing. She stepped closer. "Daniel, I told you on your first day. No distractions. No excuses." I looked at her. For 3 months I'd hidden my daughter because I was terrified of this exact moment. Now it had arrived. Victoria continued. "We are at the finish line. Don't throw away everything you've worked for." I thought about Marcus. I thought about the drawings buried inside my desk. Then I thought about Mia alone in a supply closet, crying for her father. Something inside me broke. But it wasn't the kind of break that makes you fall apart. It was the kind that makes you finally stand straight. "Then fire me." Victoria's expression changed. "My daughter needs me." My voice was steady now. "She's 7 years old, she's terrified, and I'm going to her." Nobody spoke. "You can keep the bonus." I looked directly at Victoria. "You can keep the job." I took a breath. I quit. Then I walked away. I didn't wait for permission. I pressed the elevator button. When the doors closed, the last thing I saw was Victoria staring at me. Her expression was completely unreadable. The drive to Maplewood Elementary was a blur. Rain streaked across the windshield. My hands were locked around the steering wheel. I was unemployed. I had just destroyed my career. And Victoria Vale could probably make sure I never found another job in the industry. But none of that mattered. I had to get to Mia. I parked illegally near the school entrance and ran inside. Rain soaked my shirt. My shoes squeaked across the polished floor. I reached the main office. Principal Grant. He looked relieved to see me. Mr. Reed. Where is she? He pointed toward his private office. She came out of the supply room. I moved before he could finish. I opened the door. And stopped. Mia wasn't crying. She was sitting comfortably in a large chair, eating a strawberry frosted donut. Across from her sat Victoria Vale, my billionaire boss. The woman who had just watched me resign. She was holding an expensive bakery box. For several seconds, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Victoria didn't belong in an elementary school. She belonged in skyscrapers, boardrooms, private elevators. Not inside a principal's office surrounded by children's artwork. Mia took another bite. Hi, Dad. I rushed toward her. Are you okay? I checked her arms, her face, her hands. Are you hurt? She shook her head. I was angry. Principal Grant said you were screaming. I was. She looked at her donut. But then the fancy lady brought snacks. I slowly turned toward Victoria. Why are you here? She answered calmly. I followed you. You left the office? Yes. You came here? Obviously. I stared at her. Why? Principal Grant nervously interrupted. Ms. Vale helped us get Mia out of the supply room. I looked back at Victoria. She had the same cold expression she wore during board meetings. Why did you personally come here? She closed the pastry box. You walked out of my building today. I said nothing. You made a decision no one else has made in years. She stood. You accepted a serious consequence rather than abandon someone who needed you. She looked directly at me. That surprised me. I was still angry. You fired Marcus for taking time off when his wife had a baby. Victoria's expression didn't change. I fired Marcus because he lied. What? When I asked why he needed the time, he panicked and invented a medical excuse. She paused. He didn't tell me his wife was giving birth until security was already escorting him outside. I stared at her. Why does that matter? Because someone who is willing to lie about the most important thing in his life will lie when my company is under pressure. I didn't know what to say. Victoria continued. For the last several weeks, I've been testing people. The long hours? Part of it. The impossible deadlines? Part of it. The pressure? All of it. She folded her arms. I wanted to know what people would do when pushed beyond their comfort zone. And they lied. She looked around the room. They hid sick parents. They hid newborn children. They hid exhausted spouses. They pretended they had no lives outside this company. Her voice became quieter. They became machines. She looked at me. And I hate machines. I frowned. Then why make everyone behave like one? Her expression softened slightly. Because I wanted to see who would refuse. I stared at her. You didn't refuse until today. She glanced at Mia. You walked away. You chose your daughter. I didn't know whether to feel angry or relieved. Victoria picked up her handbag. The Orion meeting started 12 minutes ago. I glanced toward the door. I'm not going back. I know. I'm taking Mia home. I know that too. She walked toward the door. Take tomorrow off. I looked at her. Paid. She continued. Take your daughter somewhere. Go to a movie. Sleep. She turned back. Thursday, be at your desk at 9. 9? 9. She looked at me seriously. You will work a normal day. If you need to leave to pick up your daughter, you leave. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But when you're working, I expect the same determination you showed me today. She opened the door. One more thing. I stopped her. Why the donuts? For the first time, the corner of her mouth lifted. Hostage negotiations go better with sugar. Then she walked away. Mia looked up at me. She's weird. I laughed. Yes. The drive home was quiet. Mia sat in the back seat, carefully picking sprinkles off her second donut. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting Victoria's black car to appear behind us. It never did. When we reached the apartment, everything looked different. For weeks, I treated the place like a motel. A place to sleep between shifts. Now it felt like home again. Mia tugged on my wet sleeve. Dad? Yeah? Are you mad at me? I knelt down. I pulled her into my arms. I was never mad at you. I hugged her tightly. I was mad at myself. She rested her head against my shoulder. I'm sorry I wasn't there. She was quiet for a moment. Then she whispered. The fancy lady said you were fighting a dragon. I laughed. Did she? She said you were winning. I shook my head. That's Victoria for you. The next morning, I didn't set an alarm. I woke at 8:30. Mia was watching cartoons in the living room. It was Wednesday. For the first time in weeks, we had nowhere we needed to be. We made pancakes. We went to the park. I pushed her on the swings until my arms hurt. I listened to her stories. I answered her ridiculous questions. And for several hours, the weight I'd been carrying disappeared. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Thursday was coming. Victoria Vale wasn't the kind of person who gave gifts without expecting something in return. Thursday morning, I walked into Meridian Logistics at 8:55. The entire office seemed different. People stared. Nobody said anything. I reached my desk. And froze. Sitting on top of my keyboard was a silver frame. Inside it was one of Mia's crayon drawings. The exact drawing I'd hidden in my bottom drawer. I picked it up. My desk phone rang. I answered. Read. Victoria's voice. Come upstairs. I took a breath. Then walked toward her office. Victoria stood beside the window when I entered. She was looking out over the city. The Orion deal closed. I didn't respond. The client signed last night. She turned toward me. I used your projections. She paused. They were flawless. I nodded. Congratulations. Sit. I sat across from her desk. For the first time, she looked tired. Not ruthless. Not powerful. Just tired. My father worked at a steel mill, she said. I wasn't expecting that. He worked 70 hours a week. She looked toward the window. He missed my piano recitals. A pause. He missed birthdays. Her voice became quieter. When I was 16, he suffered a massive heart attack at work. I listened. He died before the ambulance arrived. She looked down. The company sent our family a gift. What kind? A ham. I blinked. A ham? She nodded. 25 years of his life. Her jaw tightened. And they sent my mother a $15 ham. She leaned forward. My mother sold the house a month later. Silence filled the office. I decided then that I would never become the person waiting for someone else to decide my family's fate. She looked at me. So I became the machine instead. She gave a humorless smile. I built companies. I destroyed competitors. I broke people before they could break me. I convinced myself that caring was weakness. I shook my head. Caring about your daughter isn't weakness. I know. It was the first time I'd heard Victoria admit that she might have been wrong. She opened a drawer. Then pushed a thick folder across the desk. What is this? Your new contract. I opened it. My eyes widened. You can't be serious. You are no longer a senior project manager. I looked up. You'll be the new director of logistics. I stared at her. The salary increase was enormous. Stock options. A corner office. Benefits I'd never imagined. Why me? She leaned back. Because you know how to build a spreadsheet. Then she smiled slightly. But more importantly, you know when to tell the CEO she's wrong. I laughed despite myself. She continued. I need someone in this company who isn't afraid of me. I looked down at the contract. What are the conditions? You leave at 5. I looked up. 5? 5. She continued. You take your weekends. What if there's an emergency? Then we deal with it. She leaned forward. If you log into the company system after 6 without authorization, I'll personally make sure you regret it. I smiled. And my daughter? If she needs you, you go. I looked at Victoria. The woman who had terrified me for months was offering me the very thing I had been afraid to ask for. A career without sacrificing my daughter. I picked up the pen. I have one condition. Her eyebrow rose. Go ahead. If you ever come to my daughter's school again. She waited. You bring enough donuts for the entire class. For a second, Victoria stared at me. Then she laughed. A real laugh. Not the cold smile she used in meetings. A genuine smile that reached her eyes. Deal. I signed the contract. My life didn't suddenly become perfect. Meridian Logistics didn't transform into some magical workplace where everyone held hands and sang songs in the break room. The company was still demanding. The deadlines were still brutal. The margins were still tight. And Victoria Vale was still Victoria Vale. But now she had someone willing to challenge her. My new position was difficult from the beginning. I moved into a corner office near hers. I got a real desk. A comfortable chair. And a direct line to the CEO. I used that line often. 3 weeks into my new position, a massive snowstorm shut down several distribution centers. The Midwest supply chain was in chaos. Regional managers were panicking. At 5:45 on Friday afternoon, Victoria called an emergency meeting. I walked into her office wearing my coat. She looked up. Where are you going? Home. We have a serious bottleneck in Kansas City. Kansas City is buried under snow. She frowned. Then we need to push harder. No. Her eyes narrowed. The contingency plans are already active. I continued. Calling regional managers every 15 minutes won't make the snow disappear. She stood. If this reroute fails, we could lose millions. Then we deal with the loss. I picked up my briefcase. I'm not keeping 40 people in the office on a Friday night so they can stare at weather reports. She stared at me. I'm going home. To do what? Make tacos with my daughter. I smiled. I'll check the satellite data at 8 tomorrow morning. The room became completely silent. It was the same dangerous silence I'd experienced months earlier. Victoria stared at me. She was testing me. I didn't move. Finally, she exhaled. Fine. I smiled. Have a good weekend, Victoria. She waved me away. As I walked out, I heard her cancel the emergency meeting. Downstairs, the entire office seemed to breathe again. Months passed. Spring arrived. My bank account no longer looked like a warning sign. I bought a safer car. I paid off the credit card debt that had haunted me for years. But none of that compared to the biggest change. Mia got her father back. The tired shadows beneath her eyes disappeared. She became loud again. Curious. Happy. She built elaborate forts in our living room. She asked questions about gravity. She wanted to know why airplanes stayed in the sky. She wanted to know whether dragons could survive on another planet. Our apartment became noisy again. And I loved every second of it. Then one ordinary Tuesday in April, my phone rang. Maplewood Elementary. My heart jumped. But this time it wasn't an emergency involving Mia. The school had a plumbing disaster. A major water pipe had burst. The building was closing immediately. Jenna was in the middle of college exams. There was no backup. So I grabbed my keys. I told my assistant to move my afternoon meetings. Then I drove to school. Mia climbed into the car carrying her backpack. Where are we going? Work. Her eyes widened. Your office? Yep. She smiled. She seemed excited by the idea. I brought her into Meridian Logistics. I set her up in my office with a sketchpad, markers, and a tablet. Then I left the door open. About an hour later, I was reviewing an audit when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels approaching. Click. 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 Victoria stopped at my doorway. She was wearing a white suit. She looked exactly like the ruthless billionaire from every financial magazine. Her eyes moved from me to Mia. Mia was lying on her stomach on my expensive carpet, drawing a dragon. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Read. Yes? I see we've opened a daycare. Mia looked up. Her eyes widened. It's the fancy lady. Victoria looked at her. Hello, Mia. She didn't use that fake, exaggerated voice adults sometimes use with children. She spoke to Mia normally. As if she were speaking to another executive. I understand your school experienced a structural problem. A pipe exploded. Mia nodded solemnly. There was disgusting water everywhere. Victoria considered this. Poor infrastructure maintenance. She nodded. A common problem. Mia held up her drawing. I'm making a dragon destroy a castle. Victoria studied the picture. The drawing was chaos. Orange flames. Red scribbles. A crooked castle. She stared at it for several seconds. The fire distribution is effective. Mia smiled. The castle is doomed. Victoria nodded. Excellent work. Then she looked at me. I need those audit numbers by 3. I'll have them. She glanced at Mia. Make it 4. I raised an eyebrow. Why? You have a guest. She walked away. Then she stopped. Make sure she gets something from the cafeteria that doesn't smell like garbage. And just like that, she disappeared down the hallway. I leaned back in my chair. Mia returned to her drawing. The office continued humming around us. The company was still a machine. It always would be. But I wasn't just another cog anymore. I had a voice. I had a place at the table. And, most importantly, I had my daughter. I picked up my pen, looked down at the crayon dragon on the carpet, and smiled. Sometimes we spend so much time building armor around ourselves that we forget why we started fighting in the first place. We convince ourselves that success means sacrificing everything. That being strong means never needing anyone. That work comes before life. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the thing you're terrified to lose everything for. Because the people who truly matter aren't waiting for you at the office. They're waiting for you at home. And sometimes, when you finally choose them, you discover that you didn't lose your future. You found it.